clarification points, and just for transparency, I want to make sure people know. So if you look at what is posted on the committee website, on page 1, there's a minor little strikeout towards the bottom of page 1. And then on page 2, there's some clarifying language about a third of the way down under the let's see, during their presentation, they were looking at the goals for all 3 schools related to the SRO programs. And then the results, where we started talking a little bit about the CHINS program, which is the Child in Needs of Services. So there's just some clarifying language I want to make sure people knew about. And these modified minutes are what you all are hopefully going to act upon, so that these become the formal minutes for the board and records. That makes sense? That sounded way too formal than I meant to present it, but that's what's in front of you and is on the website.
So has everyone had a chance to review those minutes, or how, Emma, how do you want to handle that as far as approving the minutes?
Same motion,
Okay.
just so everyone's clear.
We'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting of the SRO. Can I get a first for that? Just a thumbs up, please. Thank you, Connor. And then a second. Thank you, George. Okay, now with that, we will close out that part of it, and we will open up the visitor public comment section for our meeting, as we do for at the beginning of every one of our SRO meetings. And we're asking that all visitors, as we've entered everybody in from the waiting room, that they make sure that they have their full name and they have a picture, just to make sure, just for safety purposes, to make sure that everybody is that it's actually a person. And then we're going to ask each person, each member of the community that would like to speak, that they adhere to our guidelines that we had set forth at the last meeting. And those guidelines are: you'll speak from your personal experience and understanding. You will listen to understand someone's lived experience. Listen to understand, excuse me. Question and disagree with ideas, not people. Honor people's identity by believing their lived experience. No personal attacks. Acknowledge the difference between intent and impact. Take responsibility for the negative impact of your actions and your words, and to honor the work and the people engaged in this complex topic. So each person that would like to speak, we will ask you that you will adhere, we will ask you to agree to those guidelines set forth, and then we will hear the public comment from that. With that being said,
Shannon,
John, do we have
one quick thing, Shannon, sorry.
Sure.
Just before we get into folks who are on the meeting tonight who'd like to speak, just to let folks watching at home and even in the room today know, there were 2 additional public comments that were submitted electronically via email and whatnot that have been posted to our website, and that we do update that every couple days or so as things come in through the submission through the website and or other means. We PDF it and post it. So there's 2 more up there since our last meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. Okay, John, do you have anybody that that would like to speak from the community tonight? If you could put your name in the chat box, and John will see that, and I'll call out from the chat box. That's how we'll do the forum as well. So if there is anybody that would like to speak, this is now the time to put your name in the chat box, and we will hear from you. Okay.
I have Ryer.
Okay. Ryer, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then I'm going to ask you, do you agree to adhere to the guidelines that the committee has this evening?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Ryer, I'll be timing the 2 minutes, and I'll do a friendly wave when we get close to that.
Okay.
I just didn't want to interrupt. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to thank the committee, first of all, for putting those guidelines in place. Last time I attended, there were people who basically called my lived experience derogatory or something. So I want to appreciate the work the committee's put into making this a space where people can speak from their experience and from the place they've come from. So first of all, just thank you for that. Since the last time I've been here, I had my daughter had experience with an SRO coming to her classroom, and I asked her if she wanted to speak, and she didn't feel comfortable speaking, but she did say I could at least tell the story of what happened. And so I just wanted to say that she had an experience where she was in class the SRO came into her classroom and she was terrified and basically had to go to the bathroom and hide. And she felt like she had to hide until the SRO left. And so this is an experience that she had. It's an experience that I don't think any child should have to have, feeling scared enough in their classroom that they have to hide in the bathroom. And this is a reality for her. It's a reality for other students. A study recently came out that showed that Vermont has the highest, highest disproportionate amount of arrests of children with disabilities in the nation. That is a real study, just came out. Reporter has been looking into doing an article about it. And so I really think, given the history of what's happened at Maple Run with a student, at least one that we know of, who's was assaulted and called a slur, that's incredibly troubling, and it shows a pattern. And what I've seen from St. Albans Police Department is a pattern of gratuitous violence. And this isn't just one police officer, it's a—
Ryer, I'm sorry.
So thank you.
No, if you could fit, yep, thank you. John, do you see anybody else in the chat that you?
Don't have anyone else at the moment.
Okay, if there's anybody else that would like to speak, we go ahead and enter your name into the chat. Okay. Looks like we are good. We're good with the chat tonight. Thank you, Ryer. Appreciate that.
Sorry,
And
I think we have a name in there in the chat.
Oh, do we? I can't see it on my side. I'm sorry. Who do you see,
Katie.
Mark? Oh, Katie. Okay. Okay, Katie, do you agree to adhere to the guidelines set forth this evening by the SRO committee?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I just had a quick question, actually, not even a comment. Are you guys going to go over the survey that was sent out tonight? Is that part of the agenda? Perfect. That's all I had to ask.
Yes, I believe that is part of the agenda as well this evening. The subgroup committee will send out or will do their presentation tonight. Unfortunately, we're a few members short, but Emma's going to step in and help Connor with that as well. So, so we'll do our best with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
ready to pass it over, Shannon?
I'm ready to pass it over to Connor and to Emma. So we'll close out the public comment this evening, and we'll pass it over to Connor and Emma.
Great. And before I pass it to Connor real quickly, I just want to remind folks, members of the public, as well as committee members for that matter, committee members will be able to ask their questions by coming off mute. But for the sake of our keeping our space safe and productive and inclusive, you can still chat questions through to the host, and we will include your questions on the presentation of what we're about to go over in terms of content. We'll bring them into the Q&A section when we get to that portion of the meeting, as we did at the last meeting. So just remember, at any point if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it into the chat, and we'll fold it in as we get to that section. So Connor, do you want me to just go ahead and get started and do the screen share, or do you have any opening brilliant things you'd like to say before we get going?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
I'm sure you're gonna have brilliant things to say. So hold on, let me just screen share everyone. And as I'm doing this, the subgroup team working on what we'll be going over tonight was Sarah Biggie on the committee and Connor here. And Sarah had an emergency that took her away from the meeting tonight. So I'm going to do my best to be Connor's right hand here. And if there is a question on content in particular that we cannot get to, I'm sure everyone will understand the need to be flexible tonight, that we'll take down that question and then get a written response out to not only the committee, but we'll post it on the website. And we still have 2 more meetings to go for this committee. So we'll just be flexible in making sure that anything that we can't answer gets answered. Sound good? All right, great. Flexible crew. All right, so let me screen share, which is my moment where I always have a slight panic that I'm going to share the wrong thing. Here we go. That is not the wrong thing. That is the right thing, right? Someone's going to give me a nice, pleasant nod. All right, cool. Connor, thank you. All right. Oops, except I'm on totally the wrong slide. Hold on, people. Hold on. I don't have nightmares about this anymore, but I certainly like to be better organized and flow. Thank you. All right. All right. So, so folks know that the second subgroup of this committee's charge, and the theme of tonight, if you will, is to look at the current practices of the SRO program at Maple Run. So a few different pieces of information went into compiling this, and Connor can certainly jump in, but a few major components included some interviews with key folks in the community. That will be one piece that if Connor knows that information when we get to those slides, I invite you to jump in, Connor, because I'm not sure of the individuals or the positions that Sarah did these interviews for, but the content is here on slides that we'll go over, as well as one of 3 surveys that folks probably heard have been circulating in the community. One was a community-based survey, which was sent out community-wide through a few different channels. Those results will be incorporated in tonight's presentation. There were 2 other surveys, one to staff within the school district and a third and final one to students. Those 2 surveys will be incorporated in next meeting's information. So one thing I will flag on the outset as we go, and Connor's going to get more into the data, but just know that information we're sharing tonight is just the community data. So that would be folks who self-identified as community members, current parents, former parents, current guardians, former guardians. We have some alumni in the mix there. It was all sort of a self-attesting that those were who the folks were. So we will get into that, but just that's the universe you're seeing tonight. And it is not students and parents, students and staff yet. Okay, all right. So the overview of what this group had prepared for you all tonight was to ask these questions. What are the current goals? Last time we looked at the history. So now it's like, what are the current goals as of 2020, 2021 for the SRO program? What are the objectives? What are the day-to-day activities of what folks are really doing in this program? The second was what are the most important functions that the SROs are doing in the schools today? What concerns are they addressing? The third piece was around the attitudes towards the SRO program by folks who interface with them. The next one was really getting a handle on who benefits and what parts of the school and community population are negatively impacted by the SRO program. And the group did this by looking at some national research, and all of the information that we've been utilizing is up on the website, and any additional resources that this particular subgroup came across in their work will, if it's not posted at this exact moment, will be posted in the next couple of days. We have a folder dedicated to pieces that they looked at specifically, in addition to the other stuff we have on the website already. But they looked at national research. They looked at past board meetings, because there's been some board meetings in the community that have had significant public comment on this. So they went back and reviewed those. They looked at public comments also from these committee meetings and additional resources. Connor, anything else to add there before we go on?
No, not really.
Okay. So just as a reminder, these are where the SRO staffing is currently within the 4 schools within the Maple Run School District. There's full-time SRO positions at BFA St. Albans, the St. Albans City School, and SATAC, the St. Albans Town Educational Center. And then part-time as needed, sort of on an on-call basis, is SROs go to the Fairfield Center School. And it says about 2 times a month is roughly the estimate, I believe, around how often they're at the Fairfield campus. And again, if you have questions as we go through here, just make sure you jot them down, because since I'm screen sharing, I can't see everyone's faces anyway. But I'll also ask you to just directly chat Shannon or John if there's something that really needs a clarification in the moment, because just remember, I did not prepare these slides and I'm doing my best to stand in for Sarah here. Okay. So the current objectives and goals for the SRO program, and this is again drawn from looking at the MOU that is again on our website, as well as conversations that Sarah had with folks. And forgive me, I am going to read these slowly off for folks to just make sure the information is accessible, since we're not closed captioned here. But the goals and objectives of the SRO program based on the MOU from 2016 are to foster educational programs and preventative related activities that will increase students' knowledge of and respect for the law and function of law enforcement agencies. The second is to encourage the SRO to attend or participate in extracurricular activities held at the schools, and when possible, such as parent meetings, athletic events, and concerts. The third is to act swiftly and cooperatively when responding to major disruptions or flagrant criminal offenses at the school, such as truancy, disorderly conduct by trespassers, miscellaneous juvenile problems in and around the schools, the possession of or use of weapons on campus, the illegal sale or distribution of controlled substances, bomb threats, and riots. The fourth is to report serious crimes that occur on campus and to cooperate with law enforcement officials in their investigations of crimes that occur at the school. And finally, to cooperate with law enforcement officials in their investigation of criminal offenses which occur off campus. So that's currently what's in the active MOU. So diving in a little bit more deeply around the duties, sorry, this is still in the MOU, sorry. I'm trying to make this as smooth as possible. Thank you for your patience. So further into the MOU, the next one would be to protect lives and the property for the citizens and school students attending school, to the students attending the school, to enforce federal, state, and local criminal laws and ordinances, and to assist school officials with the enforcement of the educational policies and administrative regulations regarding school conduct, to investigate activity committed or on or adjacent to school property, to counsel students in special situations such as students suspected of engaging in criminal misconduct when requested by the principal or the principal's designee or by parents of a student. The next piece would be to answer questions that students may have about the Vermont criminal or juvenile laws in the state, to assist other law enforcement officers with outside investigations concerning students attending the schools to which the SRO is assigned, and finally, to provide security for special events or functions such as PTA meetings at the request of the principal. Okay, so those are the MOU goals and objectives. So these next pieces are through these interviews that Sarah conducted to get a sense of, there's in all places, there's what's on someone's work contract, and then there's the reality of what happens in the workplace or in the day-to-day activity. So I believe this is a summary of that. So the day-to-day activities through the lens of the guidance, social worker, and student support staff, I believe. And Connor, is that true from your understanding of who Sarah talked to by chance?
Yes, I believe
okay.
so.
Awesome. Okay. So this would include morning traffic. So dealing with morning traffic, greeting students and parents in the school community each day, home visits with the home and school coordination as needed, which I assume would be the staff who do that as well. Parent meetings as requested by parents and staff. The mentoring of a few students who have requested that through parents or guardians. The responding to missing students. So I guess well child visits. So if a child is missing, to go do a well home check or check on that student. Building safety response. So walk around the building, checking entry points and the grounds for safety, remaining outside when some of the recreational and recess time is happening, doing safety inspections and adult training regarding maintaining the school's safety. And in non-COVID times, being present at the lunch and cafeteria during lunch hours, I assume. Also lunch groups with interested students, engaging with students during the lunch hour in groups. Pair teaching on topics like substance abuse. I imagine that's with teachers, but pairing up with teachers on those topics that include internet safety, which is in the middle level of the school, the LEAD program, which represents the Law Enforcement Against Drugs program. Engaging in parent meetings, especially regarding custody disputes, responding to any substance use on the grounds of the school. Escalated behavior is where imminent threat is a concern. So for example, an angry parent or a community member who's coming onto campus. Sitting with students who have been sent out of the class for unsafe behavior with the stated intent to build rapport with the student. Education and restorative approaches are the focus, not ticketing or giving citations to the students. And referrals to outside support such as DCF, BARG, which I don't actually know what that stands for. If anyone knows, feel free to jump in here, and restorative justice. Does anyone know what BARG stands for?
I think it's covered in the slide later on.
Is it? Okay, thanks, Connor. Okay. All right, moving on. So the most important functions of the SRO, so the specific question was asked, and these were the top 5. So addressing missing students, so students who have left the school grounds or are reported missing by guardians. The second being drug and alcohol use or sale of such substances on the school grounds. The third, internet-related concerns in the HHB, so the hazing, harassment, and bullying situations. The fourth would be building safety. so the actual building campus safety issues. And the final one, communication with the community based on safety concerns for the students. So in these interviews, additional thoughts that were raised were that their concerns were mentioned in the interviews at the elementary level, whether the SROs have enough work for a full-time position. And questions were also asked about whether a liaison type position would also work as well compared to just an actual SRO position. And slight just formatting thing, I try to create some easier ways to read these slides. So if there's something doesn't look perfect, Kathy, don't judge my marketing, lack of marketing formatting here. Okay, moving on. Connor, we good so far? Okay, cool. All right, so youth services at BARG, which is the Balance and Restorative Justice Program. Thank you, Connor, it is defined. So the youth services at these two locations which do restorative justice practices. So one is the Franklin Grand Isle Restorative Justice Center, and the second is the Balance and Restorative Justice Program. These programs exist to support students in restorative practices as well as within the community, and anyone else can certainly jump in here. But the objectives are to make sure that young folks are not more cases are going to diversion, so it changes sort of the response to getting young folks into the criminal justice system, and local partnerships and the SRO responses. So the SROs in the district have increased referrals and used these restorative approaches more in the last 5 years. The Restorative Justice Program reports enhanced partnerships with the law enforcement. So I'm taking this as there's been an increase in more partnership over the years with these particular restorative justice-based programs. Okay, so there's also conversations with the district's equity committee. And within, I think these would be recommendations, I believe, from the equity committee related to their responses to the SRO program. And that included, they felt continued professional development and training would be good. Implementing a plan for restorative practices as a district. So I imply here that there isn't a restorative practice plan, and so perhaps there might not be consistency, or maybe there's clarity needed here. And that supports student leadership and invites student voices into the process of the SRO program. And one member, there's a quote here, one member gave feedback, soliciting feedback from people most impacted and relying on local voice and local data, not national data. It's important, I assume. And many studies are done in communities with very different demographics, and needs can therefore be dismissed as not relevant to our community. So, so I think here it's like sort of balancing the two from this person's point of view about the need to kind of really hear feedback from those most impacted. And also we've had this conversation in this committee around like really looking at studies and drawing what we can for things that are helpful to this conversation. Okay, we're gonna get into the survey, and this is you, Connor? Is this number 10?
Yep.
Okay. And just
so
tell me when to click.
Okay. So I mostly looked at the survey data from the community survey that we sent out a while ago. And before we get into that data, there's just some important things to note about it. Like we already said, students and staff at the school district are not included in this data because they were surveyed separately, and we did not have that data when we made this presentation. Then the other important thing to note is that the sample size for the BIPOC community was only 11 people. So it's a very small sample size. So that's just worth considering as we're looking at this data. Okay, so general feelings towards the SRO program. From the survey data, it appears that the feeling towards the SRO program is overall positive. When asked, should SROs be in schools, 78.9% of women said yes, 15.5% of women said no, and 7% of women had no preference or qualified their answer. In contrast, 84.3% of men said yes, 15.7% of men said no, and 2% of men had no preference or qualified their answer. 81.8% of BIPOC respondents said yes, 27.3% of BIPOC respondents said no, and 0% of BIPOC respondents had no preference or qualified their answer. 78.4% of white respondents said yes, 16.77% of white respondents said no, and 5.7% of white respondents had no preference or qualified their answer. Overall, the responses favored keeping the SRO program.
And Connor, I'm just going to add here that as we get into other calculations, you'll see the top 3 in other questions. If people took the survey, you might remember there were 5 responses. So just if you're frantically trying to add things up to 100, as we get into further slides, it may not total 100.
All right, so however, it should also be noted that when asked, are children safer with SROs, the top 3 responses per category were 58.5% of women completely agree, 14.08% of women agree, and 13.4% of women completely disagree. 72.6% of men completely agree, 11.8% of men agree, and 9.8% of men completely disagree. 54.5% of BIPOC respondents completely agree, 27.3% of BIPOC respondents completely disagree, and 9.1% of BIPOC respondents were agreed or were neutral. There was a tie. 59.3% of white respondents completely agree, 15% of white respondents agree, and 13.8% of white respondents completely disagree. And the percentages of people who believe children are safer with SROs and the percentage of people who believe SROs should be in schools differs in each one of those 4 categories. So we believe we should do some further investigation to see if this is polling error or if there's another factor that's worth investigating. And then these next few slides, we took some, there were some open-ended questions, and we just took some comments from there to kind of give everyone an idea of some of the things we're getting there. So these comments are from community members, not anyone on the committee or anything like that. So I'll just read these aloud. Number 1, we need to recognize that systemic racism exists in policing and that the fears many in the BIPOC community have around police are real. Anyone familiar with the UVM study on who gets pulled over by the police, disproportionately people of color, in Vermont will have to admit to the systemic nature of it. And a link to that study is at the end of the presentation. And then the second one, as a parent of a special needs child, this is a huge benefit. Not all police forces understand autism, and SROs sees these behaviors daily and have an understanding of autism that not a lot of people do. Oh, I should mention that those are in response to the question, do you think SROs should be in schools? Sorry.
And Connor, when you're done these slides, I will also just add a little bit of some of the pieces that I offered in the analysis to you and Sarah, just around like how many respondents and stuff. So if folks have that question, I'll come back to that. So keep going, Connor, and I'll add that when you're done.
Okay. Then these comments were in response to what would you change about the SRO program? The first one, provide additional training to ensure the role of officer is acclimated to the uniqueness of dealing with children/adolescents in a school setting. Provide accountability and supervision to the position, not only to the police force, but also to the school leadership. The second one, I support some functions for SROs, but I feel that they are asked to do too much by school administration and that their presence in schools is problematic, given the current climate. I suggest that the district take a break from SROs and then reassess. And then just when asked if they had any further comments, these are some of the responses. The first one, I think the money that pays for an SRO would be much better spent on a full-time psychologist or more counselors or other positions in the school that would help the mental health of students. SROs are not needed at schools. People who are educated in mental health, crisis management, and behavior intervention are needed in our schools. The second one, any arguments against SROs should be examined as constructive criticism for how the program can be improved. Eliminating SROs would be like removing fire extinguishers and sprinkler systems. They are there for safety and to save lives. And then for what the data suggested who was disadvantaged, one of the most interesting results emerged when respondents were asked if they had had a negative experience with an SRO. 10.2% of white respondents reported they had, while 27.3% of BIPOC respondents reported they had a rate of approximately 3 times that of the white respondents. Was I going to do this slide?
So why don't I'll come back to this in just a second. So let me just stop screen share and just say a few more things about this slide. If I can stop, hold on. There we go. All right. I'll go back to that slide in just a second, but just for the sake of getting a little more context, Connor, excellent job. Thank you as our student representative. Just want to acknowledge that's a lot for a high school student to take on. So excellent job, Connor. So folks just have a little bit of context, and again, we'll get to questions in just a minute. So again, these are responses just from the community survey. There were a total of 218 responses from folks, and we'll talk a little bit about this in discussion around how the committee would like to go forward, because it was through a Google form, so we have more of the aggregated, which is Google form is a little bit wonky, where it can't give you the narrowed down analysis, which we did separately, but it gives you like pie charts and stuff, so we can talk as a committee about how to post that for folks to kind of dive into the data. But so there were 218 responses total. And in some cases, the response numbers given small town Vermont were so low. So there, if folks filled it out, you might remember there was a place for people to put additional identifying factors that they wish, like LGBTQA kind of identity issues, or low income, or disability, or whatever it might be. And when I was supporting this subgroup and doing the analysis, some of those numbers fell so low that it did not feel like the responsible thing to specifically call out like what the 3 LGBTQ folks said about a particular thing, especially if a comment got attached, because it's small town Vermont, right? So while everyone's comments are pulled in the aggregate where it was a big enough group, some of it was just too narrow based on the smaller numbers of folks. So anything that the committee were to share, I would just recommend that we not provide down to the actual row of someone's actual individual responses, for that reason of really maintaining some level of confidentiality for individual responses, not the big aggregate responses. So that's the first thing. The second is for folks who gave us their gender identity, there were not everybody agreed to either give their racial ethnicity identity or gender identity, and that's for a whole host of reasons. And we can't sort of just draw large conclusions about why. It's, again, small town Vermont. People might just want to have protect that part of their identity and just answer the questions. Some people might not find that relevant. Some people find that really relevant, but don't want to put themselves in that vulnerable place. There's a whole host of reasons, right? So I just want to flag that any of the responses you got in the aggregate that Connor shared are simply reflecting the folks who did choose to tell us, which was the vast majority of if they're a woman or a man. There are folks with other gender identities, but again, that number was so small, it didn't feel safe to name the 1 or 2 people. It was literally 1 or 2 people with a different gender identity. And similarly with BIPOC, there might be more BIPOC folks who responded, but did not say as such. And so their numbers are in the bigger totals, but not specific to the BIPOC responses that you saw in the analysis. Let's see, the other thing I just want to flag, and I think you'll get into this as you get into the analysis, but a couple just observations. There are some polar opposites. You probably saw this in the strong agree and the strong disagree. Those numbers are not insignificant on either end of that. So it'll be interesting to see what you all, where you want to go with that in the conversation. And obviously in any survey, the people who are motivated to complete the survey are likely more informed and opinionated on the topic than someone walking on the street who has no children and has no understanding of the SRO program. So just keep that in mind when you're reading both the survey results here as well as students and staff, is that it's not like we went on the street and did a poll of 100 people in a controlled scientist kind of way or social scientist kind of way. So it is what it is, and we have to just apply that kind of critical lens and interpretation of the data. This is not like every single person in Maple Run was asked what they thought on these issues. So I just want to be responsible around statistics and analysis of what you're looking at. Okay, so is that the last thing I just wanted to say? We had additional breakdowns, and Connor, I don't know if you want to speak to this or not, but we did do some additional breakdowns because if folks remember the survey questions, we did ask a little bit beyond the answers there around people's ranking of what they thought if they thought SRO should be in the district in any capacity, what should their priority be? There were, I believe, 5 or 6, including safety on campus or doing mediation, et cetera. And I don't know if you wanted to, if there was a reason we didn't share that breakdown, but I just want to just kick it over to you for a minute to see if you wanted to comment on that part.
Pull that up. Do you want me to go into specific demographics or just the overall response to that?
I think just maybe just start with overall. We can, if folks go on the website, they can see, because I included in my analysis the breakdown by what women, men, BIPOC, white folks said in those responses, but maybe you can just give folks an overview so we can get into some questions in a minute here.
Sure.
Do you want to screen share or do you want to just read that off?
I'll just read it off once I pull it up. Okay. So, sorry. So this was a multiple choice question. What roles do you think the SRO should play within or outside of our school? And out of the, I believe it was 218 people who responded to the survey, 180 people said safety, visibility on campus, safety, lockdowns, crime deterrence. 105 said internal dispute mediation, dissolving disagreements through de-escalation. 166 said school patrols, monitoring school grounds, ensuring safety, suspicious activity. 137 rather, said advanced safety functions, staffing special school events and crowds. 170 said role modeling, mentoring, building positive relationships with students. 29 on this question said they did not believe SRO should be in schools. And there were a number of other very smaller responses that got about a response each.
Thanks, Connor. And when folks get to see kind of the aggregated responses, both broken down by gender or race and ethnicity, or just the overall numbers, just so folks know, not every one of these got the same ranking. Some got lower rankings around, you know, how much of a priority. Some folks just selected 1 out of the 5, some selected all 5. So there is sort of things all over the map. And as you all move towards your final meeting of recommendations, it's worth considering around just diving a little bit more into this piece of the survey, just to get those other thoughts in the mix. And then the last thing I'll just say on this, and then we'll go back to that last 2 slides or so that Connor and Sarah had prepared. We did not break the data down further based on the categories for which people identified. So again, we asked folks to sort of self-identify: are they a community member? Are they a current parent or guardian? Are they a former parent or guardian? Are they alumni? And you know, we don't know how long ago a former parent or guardian was a former parent or guardian. And just so you know, some people wrote in their comments, was clear they were a former parent before there was an SRO program at the school. So, you know, again, with all volunteer, not officially paid, you know, surveying consulting company or whatever doing these surveys, there's limitations here. And I just want to flag that there might be some more information worth doing an analysis around those who are sort of currently interfacing with the school on a regular basis versus folks who are a little bit more one step removed, who are in the larger community. And I just wanted to flag that we didn't do that level of analysis, but if the committee wanted to do that, we might want to spend some time in May going there. Okay. All right. 2 more slides, folks. Thanks for your attention and listening so far. So I'm going to do the screen share thing one more time. All right. So do you want me to speak to this, Connor? We're literally going to just read it, but unless you have any
I hadn't
wisdom.
actually seen this slide.
Okay, so how about I read it?
Recently.
Okay, so for further consideration, just sort of to pull it all together, and then we have some discussion questions once we get through other Q&A people have. But for just further consideration, out of the interviews, and I think some thinking perhaps that Sarah wanted to offer up, of things to consider: an outside consultant to specifically reach out to families of color, to LGBTQ folks, families and individuals and students with disabilities within this community in order to provide feedback directly to leadership and the board. So that might be a useful piece here to get some more not targeted, I don't mean it that way, sorry, bad choice of word, to get some more informed information that's not based on an open-ended survey. And then to also consider further consultation with Rebecca Haslam, who's a consultant with the company Seed the Way, or other consultants I imagine who do work in equity training, regarding equity training for all aspects of the school. And a question here that while the MOU states the school may also provide training in the Board of Education policies, regulations, and procedures, has the SRO attended training from the district in the actual Maple Run district training regarding implicit bias and trauma-informed care that's like integrated with what the districts, I'm assuming, providing for other staff. And that there are, of course, other further considerations worth putting into the mix. So before we do, these are the resources. The discussion questions I'll come back to as we have time, but these are the resources, and we'll post these slides up on the committee's website, hopefully tomorrow, but definitely by Saturday, so folks can take a look at that in more depth. Okay, so Connor, any final words before we open it up for Q&A from the committee and community?
Not really.
I just want to again really commend you, Connor. That was great work, and really appreciate all the time. This was a lot of work to put in, and I hope it was a good learning experience trying to, grapple with some complexities. Okay, so let's open it up, John or Shannon, questions that folks might have that we will try our best to answer, and we'll get back to you if we don't know the answer. Anything in the chat so far, John and Shannon? Okay, so we can also open up to the larger committee as well, when you can just sort of wave and come off mute. Oh, Shannon, yep.
Now Alexis has a comment. Go ahead, Alexis.
I just wanted to echo what Emma said for Connor. I know he's put in a lot of time and worked really hard, and to do this type of work at the same time that you're a student in COVID and being aware of everything that you've had to navigate academically this year, kudos to you. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or even observations before we can move right into discussion, but I really want to let folks sort of digest what you've seen, ask questions, any observations or trends, interesting things.
I think Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm just curious, where was it advertised? You said there was advertising went out. I do know a couple of people who never even heard of it.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, so once the survey was created, and Connor, you can jump in here as well, but we sent it through the executive assistant, so Brenda Comstock for the district, and asked for it to be posted in all of the district's formal communications. So that included it was posted on the district website, as I understand it, the Facebook page for the district, and then I believe on we requested at least to be posted under the district's whatever official email out on all the Front Porch Forum email lists for the district of all the communities. I don't know if there were additional places like the PTO newsletter, perhaps. We tried to go as far as the district's normal channels were and encourage multiple postings if possible. I'm not in the community, so I wasn't like double checking to see what was posted. But Connor, were this posted in any other space that you're aware of? The community survey. Not to your knowledge. Okay.
I guess my question is was it posted in other places other than school-related outlets?
Yep. So Front Porch Forum would be a non-school related, and it is something people do have to elect to sign up for. Definitely limitations there. People would have to have access to email and know Front Porch Forum exists. They are pretty well established email lists, but by no means exhausted. I guess people could come across it on the website, or if they fall, it's not just like school community members are following on social media, but those were the channels the district chose to use.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Do you want me to ask Sarah a bit more, or does that feel okay for now for that question? I'm
good with that. I just, I know people that when I started talking about the survey, they said, "What survey?" These are members of the community, and I just was kind of curious, if it went out to the messenger, let's say, or any broad, based communication like that, or was it all basically school related?
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Bob. Other questions or comments, John?
I have two questions from community members, if we're ready to do that.
Yep.
First one is from Lauren.
And do you want to read it off, or?
I don't have it. I have her name in the chat, but
okay. Well, are we okay with having the person come off mute and ask their question? Is that okay? I'm looking at the co-chairs. This is a little bit of a change. So we'll just ask the community member just to keep it to the question, if that's cool. Yeah. Okay. Great. So Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. I'm Lauren Dees Erickson. I was just curious how you guys made the decision to open the survey up to the wider community as opposed to focusing just on parents at the schools? Thanks.
So I'll start, Connor. I don't want to put you like right on the spot here. So I'll start and then add anything. And just a reminder, I'm facilitating and I wasn't involved in the individual design by the community members doing this work. There are 3 surveys. So this was the first survey for community members, which would include parents, current parents and guardians, former parents and guardians, and community members. There's a second one that is just for students and a third one just for staff. And we'll talk about those at the next meeting. And Connor, do you have some more insights on the decision to send it out further than, say, current parents and guardians? I want to be inclusive, sorry.
Not in particular, but I think it is worth noting that we did ask if they're like a current, former parent, and stuff like that. And we can break it down by those categories if that data is wanted.
Great. And I will also ask that question to Sarah just to get a little more specific, because the committee did meet without me a few times, and I don't know if that came up in further detail around sharing it more broadly or not. So we'll definitely get back to you on that. Thanks, Lauren. Do you have a follow-up, or was that?
If the data is available for current parent or guardian specific, that would be really wonderful to see. So
sure. Yep. Thank you. Great. Other folks with questions, John?
Yep. Paul has a question.
Hello, thank you. I guess my question was about the slide where it said that people had negative interactions with the SROs. My question was that elaborated on what their negative interaction was? I guess, for example, what was the SRO unprofessional, or did they just not like the outcome of whatever was going on that brought the SRO in there? And I guess where I'm going, like, if I do a traffic stop and I give somebody a ticket, well, they're going to have an opinion of me because I gave them a ticket versus not giving them a ticket. But was I professional or not professional is where I'm going with that.
Thanks, Paul. Connor, I know on each question we had a space for people to provide additional comment. Not everybody did. And so, so most people, as I recall, from looking at the back end of the data, chose in all the questions, whether it was a positive interaction or a negative interaction with SROs, most people just opted to say yes or no experience with an SRO officer. And we'd have to dive deeper into the data to specifically look for any themes for folks who elected to do the additional comments.
Yeah, we did have the comment section. We only had 11 responses to that. So.
And I would just note too that, surveys, and this committee has talked about it before, surveys and even personal statements, it's really hard because this is a public document, this is a public survey, and I'd like the committee to grapple with that a little bit about releasing individual, pieces of feedback versus aggregating what's in additional comments for themes so that it's not identifiable. But it's a very vulnerable space to put people in, right? To bring up, especially in a negative experience, what happened, not only for the vulnerability of sometimes re-traumatizing yourself. If it was a negative experience, it's a negative experience for that person, but also more importantly, the identifiable nature of that going into a public, that's a lot to ask for people to put into a survey. So just want to flag that there. Okay, other questions?
It's not a question, it's I guess more of an observation, is that we had a lot more community participation than the other communities that John and I had talked with. For the responses, we had, if I'm right, Emma, almost triple. They had like 60 some odd responses in the Montpelier area. And we had about 3 times the amount of responses from our community members. So we definitely had more participation than other communities had. So there's definitely a lot more awareness, I think, now with this. And so it's nice to see that the community has stepped up and, has voiced their concerns or their positive experience, just any of their experiences with the SROs as well.
And as I recall it, and I'm happy to go back and look at this, I think the survey that Montpelier Roxbury School District did was just to students. So that's student response, and and it'll be interesting to compare against the
Yeah.
student responses when those results are shared next time. I believe that was just to students. They did not, as far as I can tell, do a staff survey or do a community or parent survey, I believe.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep. But still, that's pretty high.
And I think that's part of the reason, that is one of the reasons why, you know, we reached out to the other communities as well to see what they had done. And that was for us, you know, deciding to branch out a little further so we could collect more data and have that information.
All right, I just froze, so you probably said something brilliant, Shannon. And if it was a question, oh, now I have unstable. Okay. All right, you're gonna have to look at my glamour shot for a minute here so I can make sure I have the right internet. See, Burlington also has internet issues. So Shannon, did I miss a question? And can you all still hear me at least?
Yeah, I can hear you. No, you didn't miss a question. It was just saying that, you know, with us reaching out to the other communities and stuff and seeing what worked for them and stuff, that I guess reaching out and getting community responses was an extra step that we took for our groups.
Great, thanks, Shannon. Yes, Kathy.
I have a question. I apologize. I had to take off for a little bit for a call. My schedule got a little upended this week and a little bit of chaos here, but what I wanted to know, and I thought this was a good time to jump in, is that we had some conversations about the history group, my group with George and Bob, whether it made sense for us to reach out to other communities. And we kind of just wanted to get, you know, in terms of the historical piece. And we weren't 100% sure if that was something that would be valuable to the committee in deliberations going forward. Obvious, you know, definitely for the current situation, but I didn't know if people really wanted more information about how, I guess, maybe the origins or the history of the programs kind of compared, because I think we had that conversation about it might be something that would be helpful, but I just kind of wanted to throw it out to the committee before we, you know, kind of put everything, you know, threw everything in and went ahead and did that. So I guess I'm just asking if people would find it valuable to get that historical perspective in comparison with some of the other communities.
What do folks think? Because we still have about a month left with together. And I really, you know, my goal as a facilitator here is to make sure folks really have a thorough amount of information and that the community knows that you've done your due diligence and the school board knows you've done your due diligence to really make a set of recommendations for them to respond to and act upon. And we can keep going through different, gathering different pieces. So including doing the additional analysis on the community survey to break down by current parent, guardian, et cetera. And to Kathy's point, would folks find it useful to do some, and we talked about inside Vermont, just to be clear, not to compare districts, you know, outside Vermont, but to do some historical comparison around I think we talked actually about school districts that both have SROs and don't have SROs and the origins of and or considerations of, because obviously not every school district in Vermont has an SRO program and many of them have different paths to getting there perhaps. So would people find that valuable? That was a question to the committee. I mean, if you find it valuable, maybe like a thumbs up. To put anyone on the spot, would you find some additional with that to your own sort of understanding? Thumbs up, like some thumbs sideways if like be nice, but not necessary, and thumbs down if that doesn't feel like something you really, really, really need. Seeing some sideways. Okay.
I think what I have been wondering sort of when we were doing our analysis was I think it would be interesting or valuable to some extent to just sort of get a feel for how many districts have SROs and how many don't, just to kind of, you know, I kind of did a little digging and wasn't able to find anything, just to sort of see, you know, what is the percentage of districts that have them versus don't. And I don't know, that could be kind of I thought it might be easy to find that, but I don't know if anyone has any.
Thanks, Kathy. I see Bob's hand. Bob?
As far as I know, every high school in Franklin County has an SRO.
Okay. So I know this isn't something that the Agency of Education tracks. It's funny what staff positions they track or not. And yeah, just for the sake of what, we're almost at 6 o'clock. So Kathy, what I would say to you, Bob and George, is if you have the capacity, knowing that you're all volunteers, since I saw mostly sideways thumbs from folks, to gather some wider viewpoints about, who has SRO programs or not, and any further digging, I would invite you to do so. I mean, you can do as much as you like here in terms of bringing information back. And I would just ask that you post information and share out with the committee, and we'll make sure that's known to the public as well, so that by May 27th, I believe is our last meeting, that we really have time to see it before the 27th to be incorporated. Sound good? Yeah, Alexis?
I just wanted to add that I think we just need to be careful with what the intention of that data is meant to be, because I think just knowing what districts or how many districts have SROs doesn't paint the larger picture in terms of what do they do and whether it's effective or helpful. So just having somebody say, yes, we have an SRO or we use SROs doesn't really give an overview of what are they doing, is it helpful, is it harmful? So I would just be cautious about that.
Thanks, Alexis. Yes, because remember our charge here, right, is to make sure that we have a local set of recommendations that works for this community, and is responsive to this community and what your neighbors and community members are telling you, and to really kind of figure out what the path forward is for Maple Run. Yeah, great. Okay, I think we're clear enough on that for now. John?
I have one more question from the chat, and that is, was there anything to prevent people from filling out the survey multiple times?
So we had that question come up during when the surveys were open, all 3 of them for that matter. And I just want to what we came to as sort of the committee leadership, and including, I believe we included Nilda as the school board chair, is that there wasn't a way to prevent necessarily, that we do ask for folks, it is a Google form. It was not a paid site. We needed to balance the anonymity of it all, where people didn't have to provide an email or some other identifiable piece about them. And so balancing all that, we weren't able to check every single line or make sure they lived in Maple Run or not. And knowing that we had 218 responses, that this was not the only data point, we felt like that was going to have to be the way that this survey would run. And reminder, we have a staff survey that went out only to Maple Run staff, and that was through Alexis. It was like through the closed Maple Run email system. So that had a little bit more bumpers around them for, and also for students, it was only sent out to networks that the students could access. So those next 2 surveys were able to have different bumpers around them. But a big asterisk on this survey is not the end all. It is not the only determining factor by any means for which the committee is being asked to make any sort of big decisions on. And I want to just remind committee members that as well, because we've had a lot of conversation around the limitations of data anyway, no matter where it's coming from. And I probably talked too much, but that's my that's my quick answer. Did I miss anything, Shannon and John, based on what we talked about a few days ago when that question came up the first time?
Oh, that sounds
okay.
That sounds right. Also, Paul confirmed that yes, all Franklin County high schools have SROs.
Okay, thanks, John. All right, so I'm going to switch gears to the committee, and committee members, please stay on if you're willing and able. We're going to switch into discussion for the next 20 or so minutes of our meeting, and then wrap up with some announcements and sort of next steps. So a few questions to pose to you. The first is, I would just love to get a little bit of a sense if sort of the recommendations that I had sent out to this group around how to share the results of these surveys. Acknowledge we want to be transparent. We want to have folks be able to look at the data on and draw their own conclusions as well. But to what extent do we share the results? So we do have individual, literally the rows. If anyone's done a Google form, on the back end, it's basically just a glorified spreadsheet. But that can make something really identifiable in a small community if there's only like 3 people who identify as being LGBTQ, for example, right? Any of those categories, or BIPOC folks for that matter. So what I'd recommended sort of before is that Google Forms it's not perfect by any means, but it does provide kind of a pie chart and sort of bar graph kind of response there. So that could be one option to share out with folks. And then it would take more certainly work and volunteer time to go through the additional comments and pull out themes. But at minimum, we could share those aggregated sort of statistical points out with the full community, like on that piece of the back end. But I would not recommend the individual Google spreadsheet, individual line piece, because I think that sort of crosses the line about keeping people safe and identities and personal stories safe. So thoughts, reactions, you can completely disagree with me, just trying to get a sense of what the committee would like to do with that piece of data. And then by extension, the survey, the student and staff surveys ahead of us.
Are we thinking that we're going to release the data from this survey or like as they come in, or would we maybe want to release all of them once we have the student and staff survey?
That is, am I delayed? Can you hear me in real time? Okay, sort of. Okay. Oh, God, I love the internet. My smallest child sometimes pulls out the plug for the Wi-Fi booster. So he's probably downstairs right now pulling it out of the wall. So forgive me, pandemic parenting, or forgive him, I should say. So I mean, we have two options. We can release the survey that we've just discussed tonight. It would be more in real time, I would just say, because our next meeting is not for 2 weeks. So, you know, some folks might be really eager to get into what we could provide for folks to look at. And if we wait, we're not going to hear about the other two surveys until 2 weeks from now. So thoughts on John's question from other folks?
I think releasing it now just might be good because it's a lot of information all at once if we did all of the surveys together. I think we heard too from a lot of people that are some of the community, and then for myself too. I mean, I've seen the data and stuff. People really, we do got to be careful on it, but they also want to see the lived experiences to those comments, so specific, that specific information, I think, and see, you know, to see that. I mean, we see it as the committee, but I do agree, like limiting that to us, and we're not trying to hide that and stuff. We're just trying to protect everybody and make sure that it's safe for everybody. So. Not sure where I was going on that. Sorry, Emma.
No, that's okay. Just to clarify, so so Shannon, are you I'm hearing release the data now, but just the aggregate stuff like the pie chart, I'm calling the pie chart stuff, and that the more individual additional comment pieces that would be shared just with the committee? Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, because I think some of the, you know, the specific comments could, because of our small community, could definitely, but people can be, unless they don't care, but that's not our job to decide that, you know, that they can be identified by their comments. So I think limiting that definitely for us would just protect the community.
Okay. I don't want to spend too much longer on this, so maybe a couple more comments, because I would love to get into analysis stuff, questions. George, go ahead.
Okay. Hearing Shannon there, I'm define myself favoring more the summary, maybe not graphic oriented, you know, graphs and such, but some type of summary. Because especially if we're talking about a student-based survey and results too, I think the nature of the information, of course, is totally fine. But if we're talking anything that might have a nexus to identifying particulars or specific people, especially with kids, I think I would lean definitely like, hey, I have to think FERPA and all that good stuff. So I would definitely lean us away from that. I think we can convey the right, you know, sense of the information without risking anything on someone's behalf.
Okay, so I'm gonna suggest, for the sake of time, that we release the aggregated, like the pie charty stuff, which doesn't have anyone's personalized information in that, and post that, because that's easy enough. It's made by Google at this point. And that for the additional comments, and I can loop back with Connor and Sarah and see if there's anyone else with just, with time on their hands on the committee, who wants to maybe help go through some of the additional comments to pull out those themes, knowing that doing that work is also asked that you're having access to, information that is confidential, and we will not be sharing that outside, but to do that work to bring those summaries so that we can post themes, concepts that were coming up, but removing things that are identifiable for folks so that can be shared with the larger community. So are people comfortable with that, with the data on this survey? We can revisit this with the staff and student survey piece of it, but I kind of see thumbs up if that's okay, or if people still have questions about that. I see some thumbs. Okay. All right. Connor and Martin kind of okay with it for now. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's move on. All right. It's the interactive portion that make sure people haven't fallen asleep on me. Okay. So thank you, because I know people are asking about the survey. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear and you've had a clear decision on that. So I want to open up the conversation with the committee, because it's important. It's one thing to see all this information and hear both the results of these interviews and get a sense of like what's currently happening with the SRO program that's different than the original, than the underlying MOU. So I think I'm going to jump to this question of looking at those, and I can put the slide back up, but the primary work, those top 5 things, and I'm going to go back in a second and find that and screen share it again, because I'm sure everyone's brains are as tired as I am. Those top 5 things are identified as the primary things that the SRO folks are doing now. To ask the question, would the impact those particular pieces of the work, the program, would that impact the community differently if it were done by a professional who was not a police officer? So what are both the benefits and losses of that? Meaning like the benefits of an SRO doing that work, the losses, that's not a good piece, but the harms potentially of an SRO person continuing to do that work. I'd love to just get some conversation going on that to kind of start thinking through, what they're doing in the district at this moment, and how might that be different, or start to think differently around getting that work done within the district, but having it done with certain people brings certain pluses and minuses. Is the question clear enough to the committee as I go search for that slide? Okay, so hold on a second. Let me just I'm going to share that slide of the top 5 things that SROs are doing currently. Hold on one sec. Okay, so again, these 5, if everyone can see that, these 5 most important functions that came out of these interviews and such were that they work on finding missing students. They work on dealing with drug and alcohol use or sale of such substances on student grounds. They deal with internet-related concerns related to hazing, harassment, and bullying. They deal with building safety and communicating with the community based on safety concerns regarding students. So again, the question is like, knowing that those are sort of the top 5 function areas, and this can be, you can toggle back and forth with both, like just the pros and cons of who else can be doing this work, what are the pros and cons of that, what are the pros and cons of continuing SRO folks doing these 5 top duties within the district. And I know this is a complicated area, but as we've talked about, it's gonna get complicated in this conversation, and this is the time to practice kind of having messy thoughts about it. This is not a clear-cut issue. They would not have formed a community committee to look at this if this was nice and easy. They're really looking for your thoughts, even if they're not perfectly crafted. So this is that invitation to step in and start thinking around. It's messy. What are your thoughts? George?
I'm willing to take a stab, and in case my signal cuts out like it did, whatever our last time was, just give me an indication. That's okay. So pure reactions here, but I'm just going to look at a couple of the bullets. Missing students left school ground and/or reported missing. With the history presentation we did, like a key positive thing from the two of the 3 pre-K 8s administrators was the immediacy and safety factors that come into play on behalf of, you know, a family or perhaps student who's maybe it's a truancy kind of thing, but there's potential, even the way that's phrased, in that it's beyond a truancy issue. It's a full-fledged safety thing. And that was where both of the administrators for SATEC and SACS related numerous instances of, if we have somebody right there who has that capability, function, knows the lingo, etc., to facilitate, hey, do we have any other information? Oh, let me get in and check kind of like the social media thing on behalf of, in this particular first bullet, the student / family of the student. I feel like that's just hitting me as whoever that given SRO is, that person's in a very key position to perhaps get a lot of information as quickly as possible. Maybe not necessarily a lot, but they're going to have their fingers connected in a lot of positive areas that could help out. Drug and alcohol use and sale in schools, if that becomes a legal issue, I think that's a pretty direct nexus there as far as the legality gets concerned. Internet related concerns, HHB. I think at SATEC anyway, so that's me again, the town school. I think our behavioral people, and that includes Sarah Biggie, who's not with us tonight. I'm aware, you know, how she, as a specific individual who's not an SRO, definitely has conversations, sometimes pretty tough conversations about hazing, harassment, and bullying. Sometimes an internet issue is initiated outside of school, and oh my goodness, hey, it ends up coming into the school because the students or even the family perhaps might bring it into the school. So I think that one, that third bullet in the middle, that's probably, to some degree, it's done differently in the different schools now anyway, and may not involve the SRO. Safety and communication with community-based safety concerns, that the last bullet I think goes right back to what Angela Stebbins and Joan Cavallo at SACS and SACS and SATEC were definitely harping on. It was very important to them. We have immediate information when this St. Albans City School bus was on the road, when there's a police action, somebody should have been able to tell the school, get that bus out of there. And that relationship didn't exist. So I think there are strong connections there, that support of these top 5 hits. There's some good rationale for people who know the right information or know who to contact to get that right information as quickly as possible.
Thanks, George, for jumping in. We heard you the whole time, or at least I did. So I assume most people did. So thank you for jumping in. Other thoughts? And we want to really kind of, you know, make sure that we're having a full gamut of the conversation here. So you can disagree, you can offer an alternative viewpoint. This is really the place to get some of these, all the thoughts out there, the things that you're hearing from other folks that you've engaged with.
I've got
John and then Bob. Yep. John.
Sure. Oh, sorry, Bob. I have a kind of two thoughts. My first thought is, did in researching the current use of SROs, did we talk with any of the resource officers themselves, or was Paul interviewed, or did we get any of that kind of information, or was it just through the lens of the school?
Well, I know we've talked to Paul about other questions along the way leading up to, I'm not sure, I have to ask Sarah specifically if one of her interviews with an SRO person specifically for this piece of it, but we've had, and there's a lot of information provided by Paul up on the website, as you all know. So, but I can double check on that one.
Yeah, definitely. It just occurred to me that, you know, we were talking about their day-to-day activities, and I was like, I wonder if we, you know, where we did that. My other thought in seeing these bullet points, at least, I'm wondering if these tasks are made, you know, or which of these tasks are made better or more efficient by someone present on school grounds. I understand, you know, some of the communication stuff. Yeah, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that any of this, at least to my eye, requires someone present in the school, but maybe.
Thanks, John. Do you have more to say before I go on to Bob?
I do not. Sorry, I was forming it as I was going. And
No
lost.
apologies. Yeah, I invite messy thoughts because I mean, I want you to like all feel like you can be starting to lean in on this. There are complexities here. We know that there are complexities. Okay, Bob?
I guess I see most of these as, if you get to these points, somewhere law enforcement's going to be involved, missing students, drug and alcohol. I look at the SRO in these situations more as a proactive as opposed to a reactive, response. You have a missing student, again, time is key. If you have the officer right there, they can take action on that rather than calling someone and then having them react. Maybe they'll be proactive. Maybe the student would come to the SRO. I know up in MVU, the SRO up there, his office is full all the time with kids that just want to talk. And so, that's a proactive situation as opposed to reactive. And that's what I'm seeing here in most of these 5 is, like I said, proactive.
Thanks, Bob. Other thoughts? I'd love to hear from everyone if you feel comfortable. Shannon?
Yep. So, I'm looking at the bullets, we've talked about, could somebody else, I can see the other thoughts, is it enough work for a full-time position? Who else would fill these roles? And I look at a lot of them, it sounds like there are people on premises that do some of these roles already. From what George said, like Sarah does some of these conversations already. There's already people in the schools that do some of these things. I feel like it's the SRO officer is supplementing what a lot of the teachers and the staff are already doing in the schools. So it looks like that they're like, I don't want to say backup, but an extra layer to help the schools run more efficiently, and so that they can, the staff can do the other things that they need to do in school and have the SRO help them with these particular things. Just a thought that I had on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. You don't have to call on people and you can always pass, but I would love to hear from other folks. Alexis? Yep. And then Mike. Alexis?
I know I drive some folks batty with the data word, but I'm going to use it again. I do wonder if it would be helpful to get more data on these 5 functions. What I'm thinking about is, how often are SROs being used in any one of these categories? So how often are there drug and alcohol use and sale on school grounds, as well as, is it disproportionate throughout the buildings? So are we finding that an SRO is definitely needed full-time at the high school, for example, but do we not need a full-time person in our other 2 pre-K-8 schools? These are just some ideas that this data is making, or these bullet points are making me think about. I know there's also a lot of work. The district is doing a lot of work as part of recovery around engagement. So when you think about students, missing or not showing up, we are looking at a liaison or type position or a district position around family engagement and student attendance.
It's useful. Alexis, thank you for that data point around the staffing position for liaison. Thanks, Alexis. I saw Mike's hand, and then Connor, if you're cool, I'm going to come back to, I'm going to round out with you. Okay, Mike?
Yeah, my question is regarding the 3rd bullet mostly, specifically the internet related concerns. Are we talking about situations where there's internet concerns when students are off school grounds or on school grounds? Are they actively doing things they shouldn't be while at school on the internet with their phones? I'd like to have that kind of drawn out more as to what exactly that means. And I do share some of the concerns there, as other people do, as to how much of this can be done by a non-SRO. And I know somebody was talking about earlier as to how many other schools don't have SROs present in their school. I think it's Kathy. Maybe we can find out what they use instead in these situations. Can I get an idea of what life looks like without an SRO in some of these schools? That's it.
Thanks, Mike. Connor, and then I totally forgot, Kathy, your camera's off, so I was missing you, but let's do Connor and then Kathy. If you want to jump in, you can always pass. So Connor?
Sure. So the thing that really stood out to me is like a lot of other people, the third bullet point kind of stood out to me as something that could possibly be handled by a support staff member or something similar to that until law enforcement intervention is necessary. It's just kind of what popped out at me at first.
Thanks, Connor. And Kathy, do you want to weigh in? Okay. All right. Challenge by choice. Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left, but my announcements are pretty quick. So I was wondering if we could just start with this question, knowing that maybe we bridge into our next conversation, because as we know, the current state of things as well as the future orientation, right, including, because we are going to look at data that's for current students and current staff, of course. These two topics are pretty intertwined. So this is really like warming us up for further exploration and thinking going forward. I'm also writing down all these questions, and we'll make sure to kind of loop back before the next meeting in 2 weeks to give you these answers, hopefully in a little bit more context to help you with your thought. But the last question I thought I would just throw out there to chew on a little bit here is, how can Maple Run meet the needs, we talk about these complexities, meet the needs of everyone in the school community, knowing that some folks are harmed by the SRO presence. They've reported as such, at least in our first survey pass, and other folks find it beneficial. So how can the district meet the needs, the complexities, like these different, there's division, there's a clear division in how people are experiencing the SRO program. So how can the district really grapple with those complexities to make sure the whole community is served? Is that question clear enough to sort of, it's a hard one, but just to kind of a little bit more thinking there. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Martin, I realized I didn't ask you for your thoughts on the other question. I'm so sorry. So please, my view was off. So if you want to jump into that last question before we go into this one, I offer that to you as well. But we can also move to this next question. How do we grapple with these complexities that not everyone has experienced this the same way? Shannon, you feeling brave to jump in? Or were you just breathing and activating your square? Okay.
No, I mean, in all honesty, we are, whatever decision is made, not by us, because we do not have the final decision on this. It's not there. There's not a winner in this, I guess you could say, because there's never going to be, we're going to do the best we can with it. And I really feel like if they say no, if we make the recommendation, no, there's no SROs, or yes, there is, there's not a clear-cut answer, I guess you could say, because it's like a policy making or laws that are put into effect. You make the decision to benefit the most people possible. And we try to do the best we can for as many people as possible, knowing that it's not a blanket that's going to cover everybody, and it's not going to be good for everybody. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm speaking in like all kinds of tangents and stuff, but yeah, it's just, it's hard. It's really hard. And we all know that. And that's why we're grappling with everything on it, but it's just trying to figure out the best possible for the maximum benefit. Does that sound, I guess? Sorry, a little bit garbled there.
No, no apologies. You know, this is complex and it's messy. It's complex and it's messy. Alexis? And then George?
Just going to take a risk here. It is a very messy, complicated situation. I do think, just being transparent, looking at it through an equity lens, I just think we need to be aware that we are a primarily white community. And even though the most numbers may say, I'm just going to use this as an example, we may on paper have the most quantity of people saying we're pro SRO, but if we have our most marginalized people saying it's harmful, we really need to look at that. So it's not just a quantity picture that we need to look at. And I think we need to be really careful about that, because I think the surveys are great. I think the surveys gave voice, but the surveys are one really, really small representation of the thoughts and the feelings and the impact that is out there in our community. So I just think about it through an equity lens, and that's why it's hard. And that's why it's a complex, uncomfortable topic.
Thanks, Alexis. George?
Yeah, so a couple times here at the house, we've just been trying to like spitball different ideas, and just a couple ideas that we'd come up with around the dinner table included such things as in a couple of communities in the news, I don't remember any details about this, so I'm sorry about that. It sounds disjointed, but there was an effort. So like if there was going to be a new police chief or something, nothing prevents a town or city from saying, hey, let's bring members of the public in, sit on this selection panel, you know, something else. So there could be an effort at buy-in, if not, you know, input into selection even by whoever it is that makes up the community, which might be an avenue towards recognizing, you know, the diversity of, you know, voices and backgrounds within a community. I should have jotted it down because there's another. So another piece. Sorry, could even be just that. Hey, if this is the first kind of committee work or like very, I don't know, hopefully successful in the long run, you know, community work to bring something up at this level, have it be present in the community for a while, then, you know, one of the takeaways to me is, why don't we know the data more? And so wouldn't there be ways, or couldn't there be ways to have some of the reporting be out there? Maybe it's, I'm not saying in terms of town meeting day must have this on the ballot every year, but reporting of statistics, at least to and now going forward in the last couple of years, if it's a Maple Run board, it's not for distinct, if there's a body, single body to take in and hear the information, see how it's going. My perspective would be the administrators want to have a healthy and successful environment at their schools. They should want that. And so maybe this is something there. I don't know if the administration.
Oh, George, we had such a good run. And then your internet froze, man. Ugh, internet. All right, George, if you come back alive. Oh, wow, that was bad. He's really gone now. Okay, nope. Okay, George, we heard most of that until you got the healthy environment in schools.
Yeah,
Was that the core of it?
I think that's pretty much it. But just wondering if we've gone into in these different roles of our subgroups here, trying to explore data and comment out on what that data looks like within our community. I mean, and I feel this personally, like, well, if there is a teacher somewhere who did really bad things with students, that doesn't mean we get rid of all the students. Or it doesn't mean we get rid of all the teachers, definitely not all the students. So I don't know, I'd personally, I'd want to see us think about our community here, our data here, the stats here, etc. But just knowing if we have avenues to get at that information, share it and not have it be this kind of hidden or quasi hidden simply because it's unaware or not brought to the broader community. And maybe those are ways to show what's actually going on, and people can make more informed decisions in the democracy. And then who knows, maybe somebody does want to bring stuff up on a town meeting or other opportunity like that. But gonna stop now. Thanks.
Thanks, George. Yeah, we heard the rest of that. So thanks for coming back on with the internet. And one observation I'll make, because we are at 6:33, is that the state itself is grappling with just the state being a white dominant state has not done a lot of data breakdown based on race and ethnicity. I would even say gender and gender identity. There's been a lot of limitations by extension through schools. It is not something that has been normally tracked or analyzed. Not that that's the only piece of this puzzle, but it is an interesting one around making sure that you have the information you need and there aren't gaps. So before we move to wrapping up, I really want to just appreciate everyone's going there with some maybe not completely formed thoughts. Just start leaning into the space, because we're headed there. I want you to get ready. We're headed there into some deeper conversation. Are there any burning thoughts that people would like to get out there on this question? I will bring it back up, so don't fear not. But are there any other final comments people would like to make, especially folks that I inadvertently didn't call on before? Okay, not seeing anyone. Y'all go super still. Oh, Martin, was that a hand? I saw it. Go for it.
All right. It does seem like most of the voices that are registering challenges with the program are coming from very specific populations. When we look at the data from the majority of the population, that is people who don't have disabilities or are not BIPOC, there really doesn't seem to be any problem from a quick review of data there. It seems most of the voices expressing issues are definitely coming from a subset that is very clearly delineated. And the percentages are not insignificant if you just focus on where the voices are coming from that express negative experiences. So does that seem to be reflected also across the nation, across the state, wherever essentially you have figures of authority? Is it the same challenges almost mirrored almost exactly? So I wonder if maybe attention to where the problems seem to be voiced from might be in something worthwhile. Clearly, it seems most of the population in our community, I think, feels that most of those functions that were listed there are being met and are being met positively, and they're happy with that. And so maybe just like in any community where if you do have a subset that maybe is not feeling those functions being met positively, then maybe that is the subset, or that's where the attention maybe needs to go to see how things can be improved, because they can be improved. These are not problems that cannot be solved. This is not, problems where you have issues voiced from a subset of community is not just limited to, police or things like that. Even back during the immigration from Europe, you had, whether it was the Italians, Jews, or whatever, there were times in history where you had problems voiced from just a very specific delineated subset, and improvements were made, and things have changed. So
thanks, Martin. it's very important that, you know, we really grapple with the fact that the multifaceted nature of your community. There is not one type of person and not one identity in your community, and sort of regardless of how big or small that group part of your community is, it's important to really make sure people's needs are met, that they're seen, that they feel safe, that they're building an inclusive community. And that's really what we're trying to work towards here. And that's hence the complexities, because there's things impact different parts of our population differently. And that's just part of the reality of the way that our culture and our country have been constructed. So big thoughts. It's 6:38. I'm working on borrowed time now. Joanna, I know you're a school board member, and we have a public comment period in the beginning of the meeting, and you're more than welcome to offer comment and through the chat or provide comment in another way to the committee. But I'm going to move us to wrap up, just out of respect, Madam School Board Member. So I'm going to wrap us up so we can move on. So because we're going to see more of each other a lot in the month of May. We have moved our meeting schedule a bit just for folks watching at home, because we wanted to account for time for April school break, as well as making sure there's adequate time for these 3 surveys to be administered. So our next meeting will be Thursday, May 13th from 5 to 6:30. We'll be looking at the student and staff surveys there, as well as additional rounded out information to look at sort of the future ahead. So pulling the conversation from today into, well, what do we want for the district going forward as of, you know, tomorrow, the next year, the years going forward, to make sure you are meeting the future community's needs, all of the folks who are part of this community. Our final meeting will be on Thursday, May 27th, also from 5 to 6:30. That's when the committee's conversation will be largely discussion. Just want to prepare you all. I'm going to try to really work with the co-chairs to make that as engaging as possible, but I encourage committee members to come with some, you know, pre-thinking, so we can really go there and start drafting up where we think that our recommendations are going to be landing. In that meeting, we'll also talk a bit about how we're going to build those recommendations, because the school board is expecting that final work product in their first meeting in June. So we're going to really work hard on that particular timeline if possible. So we'll talk a little bit about, okay, because it's, you know, it's 90-minute meeting. We won't have everything typed up perfectly and, you know, be able to vote on it, but we'll talk about the process to make sure everyone in this committee feels comfortable with the work product. And then if there are dissenting viewpoints, how we're going to incorporate that, because our charge is to work towards consensus, which is a tricky thing to do in general, even under the best of conditions with way simpler topics sometimes. Okay, so those are all my announcements. Is there anything else from the co-chairs before we close out? Okay. And Joanna just mentioned that she found an article on Digger around the number of SROs in the state, I assume, from a statewide. So if you want to share that link with me, Joanna, I'd be love to share that out, and it may even be on our additional resources. I'll have to double check, but I'll make sure it gets posted if it's not there yet. Okay. All right, folks, community members, thank you so much for joining us. I believe it was raining up where you are. It was raining here, so I didn't take you from a warm, lovely evening. It's maybe snowing in St. Albans, who knows, and then Fairfield. But I really appreciate everyone's time. Community members, thanks for starting to lean in on these complex questions. Find that courage to go deeper as we keep diving in. And extra thanks to Sarah and Connor for the work here. Mike, thanks for taking notes for us today. And I think with that, we can stop recording, and y'all have a great night. Thanks so much.